And welcome back. OneSA Movement founder Musi Maimane says while this election has been a burst of success for many independents, there are a number of outcomes of concern. Maimane says citizens have lost faith in big political parties and are seeking a new alternative. He adds that they will be ramping up their efforts to bring about a new electoral system in South Africa before the next national elections. He joins us now, Musi Maimane, founder of OneSA Movement. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. Now, you say that political stands are shifting across the world as citizens are losing faith in big political parties and seeking new alternatives. Now, do you believe this was borne out through the performance of independent candidates in this particular election?
Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon to fellow South Africans. First and foremost, I think for many people, they've grown disillusioned with empty promises. There's a political game that gets played a lot where people are told by these political parties that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. And actually, every 5 years, these promises are made and people check out of it because nothing really changes. And I think in this election, the rejection of the two big parties is an indicator of a dissatisfaction with the state of South Africa and a lack of accountability. The second reason, which I think is the most powerful of the lot, is that, in fact, people opted for people who represent their interests, who come from their communities, who are willing to go, yes, I may not have all the solutions, but I'm willing to fight that we get water, we get electricity, we get service delivery. And I think that, to me, indicates a need for citizens to rather say, we're not focused on party colors or ideology or history. We're focused on the issues that matter to us. So that, to me, is an encouraging sign.
So let's get into that. You have spoken about how the big losers are the big parties, the ANC and DA. I want to talk about personally looking at the role you played as OneSA Movement, as a founder. Are you happy that you left the big party scene?
Absolutely. And the fundamentals of why I left was to always fight for electoral reform. I've always held the view that the sooner we get direct election, the better this country will be. I'm not the first person to fight for that. It was Van Zyl Slabbert. It was the Kgalema Motlanthe High Panel report. And now we're advancing the cause to say, let's vote directly for people. And going towards 2024, given the Constitutional Court judgment to say by June next year, this law must be changed, this is a journey we must keep fighting, because when we reform it, we can give leadership to society, we can achieve better accountability and achieve the change that this country desperately needs.
And to that end, you say your legal team has served papers on the Speaker of the National Assembly, giving Parliament 7 days to communicate the process envisaged through to change our electoral laws, especially with regards to the Constitutional Court's New Nation Movement judgment. Just expand a little on what still needs to be instituted and how will it provide better institutional support or recognition for independent candidates?
The struggle that we're waging here is to say, let South Africa be reformed into a constituency-based model, that ultimately in every constituency we can find a member of parliament who stands there. That's the first thing. The second thing is we fought that it mustn't just adding a comma onto the thing to say, let independence stand. That was what the Concord judgment said. It said party representation or public representation cannot just be party basis. Independence can stand at provincial and national level. And then lastly, we want to make sure that Parliament complies with that constitutional mandate to say it was given 24 months. It's now heading towards June next year, and Parliament has dragged its feet. We gazetted and gave them the draft electoral amendment bill to say they need to be able to consider this. It reforms the law, it gives accountability to the people, and Parliament is dragging its feet. So it was tabled in the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee and still no action is taken. So what we're trying to make sure doesn't happen is for Parliament to go back to the Constitutional Court and say, please, can you give us a bigger extension? Because we don't need that. We need this change to happen.
Now, I want to place this within the discussion we're having now. You were speaking about the Van Zyl Slabbert task team. You know that there were dissenting opinions about particularly collective and individual responsibility in terms of the constitutional spirit of electoral law. Do you believe that this will grant greater accountability on an individual basis if these changes are made, and particularly now that we're seeing more independence?
I think that is the absolute thing. You know, the competence of national government is to provide housing, is to provide education, is to provide healthcare. What if a hospital in Charlotte Maxeke is not working? Who's to answer that? It can't just be a councillor, and it can't just be this amorphous political party that we don't know. We need the leader, the constituency member who comes from Johannesburg to be able to go, Charlotte Maxeke is not working, and therefore I'm going to go to Parliament to fight for that hospital to be opened. But at this point in time, we don't have any of that. So not only are the issues of citizens that are of national competence being ignored, when things fail, Zondo Commission, suddenly there's no accountability because no one gets held accountable. And then lastly, when you enhance this big party system that says majoritarianism must take place, you end up with scenarios where the big parties vote for things in parliament that are frankly at times illogical, let alone illegal. As we saw in the Nkandla judgment when they said a fire pool or a swimming pool is actually a fire pool. That was voted for by a majority of people. Whereas now, a member of parliament who's directly elected could stand up and say, no, it's a swimming pool, even if I'm in the party. And then the last thing is, could it be that one day we could get a direct election of the president? Because imagine a president who suddenly had a choice to say, I will pick the citizens ahead of my party. Cabinet reshuffles, decisions of the executive, and would be inspired by the people. And I think our constitution envisaged that situation.
So, Musi,
that's why.
Tell me what you think then about this view, that primacy of individuals over political parties will weaken associational life built on civic values in favor of divisive identities. What are your thoughts around that? Would the primacy of an individual threaten the greater community because of favor of a party?
I think the moment we ask political parties to be the sole custodians of all of our values, then I think we've got a difficult situation as a country. What we ought to do is to say to ourselves, what is the political competence here? What are the things enshrined in the Constitution that anyone must uphold? And we must be able to judge people against that. In our Constitution, you cannot advance discrimination. So no one can be able to do that in communities. You can't advance a division in society or the lack of delivery of services, and ultimately you bring accountability. Nations that have got through this have not lost their sense of who they are as countries. In fact, in Africa, South Africa is unique in this position, in that if you go to a nation like Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, constituencies and direct elections have been part of the cause. Yet you can't argue that those nations suddenly have become any more or less African or any more divided. So therefore, I do think that you can't sacrifice accountability at the altar of that type of thinking. We need to advance a view of accountability on our political principles and ask the rest of society to also participate in democracy by enhancing values, etc., etc.
All right, thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us. OneSA Movement SA founder Musi Maimane, just giving us his views of the municipal elections and the results post thereof and the electoral change that is needed there.